Hello, my name is Trent Graham, and this is my presentation over my research paper about cargo theft and specifically about televisions and the impact on the supply chain. I started off with my thesis, which is as technology improves and evolves, the price and risk involving technology also increase and evolve. So essentially, what I'm saying is that as the world matures and as technology advances, that the supply chain security is going to have to do so as well to be able to keep up with the curve. I follow up with a brief paragraph as to why technology has been expanding and the indicators that prove that it's going to continue to expand exponentially regarding Moore's Law, things like that. Next, I go into active targeting. Active targeting, as you're well aware, is whenever organized criminals specifically target loads or shipments because they know that their value is extremely high. Uh, I go on to talk about a few instances, some from the book, some from an article I found online. Next, I start to talk about the demand of televisions and why their demand is so high. Um, there are 325 million people in the U.S. And there's about 120 million TVs throughout domestic households in the U.S., which averages out to 0.37 demand of TV per citizen of the United States, which is actually insane considering the normal household size is like 2.5 or something like that. So solely alone on demand in the public market, very extremely highly demand. And then I move on to the black and gray markets and how cargo thieves interact with them to be able to make the most profit that they can, and how gray markets use well, legitimate channels, but not channels approved through the producer. So say Samsung makes a television and the truckload gets stolen and then the thief sells it back to a less reputable source or retailer, and then those TVs are then on the gray market, which in turn is just super detrimental to the market for televisions in the first place. Um, as a recap as to the three factors that make TVs the focal point for thieves, there's a high demand, a high value with relevance to other cargo theft items, and they're very easily liquidated on shady markets. So, those are my three main points as to why they're so highly sought after. And then later on, I go into how it's combated and different measures and approaches. But anyway, back to where I was, um, based on information from 2011. So I was just essentially going into some statistics for you, and I explained that of the high tech industry, they have the lowest per load payout, but at the same time, they have the highest amount of, or they're targeted the most, which is interesting, but it makes sense because the demand is so high and because the ease of ability to use. You just plug in the TV, say you have Wi-Fi and your TV is ready to go if it's a smart TV, or say you have a cable provider, your TV is ready to go. Say you buy a phone, you have to have activation codes, accounts, a excuse me, you also have to have like a service provider chip. Um, following on, I talk about the impact of cargo theft on the high tech industry and how important it is to ensure that truckloads and shipments are secure. And then I dive into the different options that companies like Samsung use, such as overnight stops and drop trailer locations and routing, which is quintessential whenever it comes to uh, ensuring that your truckloads are not stolen. Following that, I talk about the value of the TVs and the different levels of value and how they fluctuate and how they're so expensive sometimes that the loads are that companies treat them like as if they're real estate. Like the, essentially, they're treating this property like as if it's high level real estate, because if you think about it, you burn down a house which is worth $400,000. That house is burned down, 400,000 gone, but you steal a truckload of TVs, which is averaged out to $375,000, you're in the same ballpark. It's the same. It's the same essentially. Following on, I start to talk about information sharing and how that's very important, and how different processes have been implemented to benefit information sharing, such as organizations like the Technology Asset Protection Association, so TAPA, created in the early 1990s, but I'm sure you know all this. And then lastly, I go into why focusing on external operations is equally as important as internal operations, because you can drive the price down through improving your internal operations. But the fact is that if your external operations involve all your cargo being stolen or misused or broken or damaged or anything, then that ensures that your customer loyalty is going to go down. That ensures that everything is going to eventually reach the bottom line, and all these things factor into that. So your product price might be low because your internal operations are doing well, but if your external operations are doing poorly, then your product price is going to drive right back up. And lastly, I finish up with uh, a bit of evaluation over the essay itself, and I talk about how astronomical it is to focus on information retrieval, information sharing, and mainly with pursuing information uh, throughout the supply chain. And that's essentially it. TVs are and will remain probably the highest sought after commodity due to their liquidity. But this is my research presentation over cargo theft of televisions. Thank you very much.